Well, we'll begin. So what we're going to be getting into now, beginning this, is, as I've been thinking about it, it's in a sense almost like a master's class, if you will, because, you know, in the way of that we're going to be utilizing, and I'll be reading to you from this book, and kind of using it as the launching point, which means it's already got a lot of the information, and we're going to kind of really drill down deep with it over the time. So it's this is one of the classes which doesn't have a set endpoint, because we're going to go as we go through it at the speed we need to go through it. Because what we're going to be doing, as I say, as a master's class, essentially, is looking at three different things as we work through this. One is that we're going to be looking, and hopefully by the time you get out of this, knowing pretty well how to interpret your dreams, to at least be able to approach them. Because it's going to be, you know, dealing with this in how do you deal with visions and dreams? How do you understand them? So as you're beginning to understand your dreams, then you're going to be working towards getting some sense of how to deal with the book of Revelation. Come on in. Yeah, there's the front row still left. So as we're trying to get hold of this, and as I say, we're going to be utilizing dream and vision interpretation. So you're going to be learning how to do that. That's going to be some of the questions that you're going to ask, some of the approaches that we're going to share together as we work through this in a kind of a collegial manner. But doing that, we're going to be using the book of Revelation as our foil. At which point we're going to see two things. One is that what we've come through is a summary of looking at this from a dream standpoint. We can see that the book of Revelation has one aspect of which is about development. Now that should be no shock. It's the development, really, so often seen as what's going to come to the fruition, what brings us to the end. And that's why it's often end times talk and things like this. But it's a book of development. And one of the most coherent ways to understand that is actually our own personal spiritual development, is what it is. And yet, there's a third level, because we're going to look at the level of learning how to interpret it using dream interpretation. We're going to look at it as the personal level, and then, as I say, drill down even deeper, saying that on a personal level, we are a microcosm of the cosmos, of the universe. You can think on how it's said at one point by Paul that, you know, all creation groans, waiting for the redemption of the sons of men. That's what I mean by a microcosm. You know, what goes on with us is going to go on with the whole cosmos. That's the sense. So in that way, because when we are in a certain place, so it ends up the universe, the created universe in that way. And so we're going to kind of start to really explore that even more. But what it gets at is, as we look at the personal development, it also brings us to that place that everybody loves to go with the book of Revelation, is what's happening out there. But one thing we're going to probably reiterate as we go through this is that basically out there and the actions of out there are results and reflections of what's gone on in here first. We often, that's the neglected part, and that's why so often I think the book of Revelation is hard to understand, because we're trying to understand it as an external document first, rather than all things that happen, you know, in that way. All things we see, all evils that we would produce come through us. They just don't happen to us. Now, you may wonder where I'm getting at. Just think about the obvious level of that. Evil only exists because of Adam and Eve. It came through us. Evil wasn't there yet. We can go, well, wait a minute, evil was in the garden. No, the potential for evil was in the garden. God did not create Satan evil. He did not place a serpent who was evil in the garden. But there is that potential that was there that through us was manifest. At which point through us came evil and death. In that sense, in that the world. And it's through us that we're waiting for the redemption. Creation fell because of us. And it's waiting to rise.
Disobeyed?
Because we chose, well, disobedience, and what the disobedience was is
Choosing
that
to
sense.
make independent decisions.
Yeah. Choosing
To not walk with God.
yes. Choosing to not walk with God is the ultimate evil. That is ultimate evil, not having God, not walking with God. Not, and so we frame it as obedience, but the obedience is really this: do you want to walk with me or not? And our early ancestors there said, we want to do it ourselves. And then, what did we do? It was not God that got mad at us. He didn't say, I'm mad at you. What he said is, where are you? We hid. We withdrew from God, figuratively into the bushes. And God had to search for us. And so evil started with us listening to the devil, if you will, and that sense. And then, but it only came into the cosmos, basically, and into this creation through our actions, which means through our souls.
We've talked about that a little. I had this idea that at that stage we were behaving like adolescents who want to feel like they're independent of their parents, and even though their parents saying you're really better off with me, but if you insist, I won't hold you back. And then we found out what it's like to not walk with God,
Yes.
or to abandon the precepts of our parents.
Yes.
That's
that's-
an idea.
It is. Well, I think you're going to be able to, once again, expand on that as we walk through this. Because as we talk about our spiritual development, what we are talking about is just becoming human beings again. That's in many ways. Which is that thing we walked away from. And so, what is it that gets in our way from the normal adolescent who says, I don't want you, and rejects the parent at adolescence, and then sometimes comes around and goes, I want you later in life.
Guess you were
That
right.
that joke, that common joke, which is to the boy's father is really stupid when he's 16, and all of a sudden when he gets to be 26, he goes, my dad really learned a lot in the last 10 years. That idea, that's a joke which really does relate back to, now I want to go back. Now one thing we find is, there are many things that keep us from wanting to go back. We may always say we want God, but frankly, there's an underlying sense there that we want that healing, but there's an underlying stuff that gets in our way,
We don't
and
wanna
that's
give
our
up-
development.
We don't want to give up the attractions. We don't want to go through the.
Well, there's a lot. We're going to find that out. There's even more than that. That's exactly it, because we're going to kind of hit on that as we walk through and see the depth of those things, because they come at many levels. So yes, that pain, the attractions, the things we like, we don't want to give up. And so,
Just let us keep
but-
those things.
but some of them are so subtle that that's hopefully what we're going to find and reveal the subtleness of them even as we go through this. And so it is that we see, again, the three levels. Dreams. Understanding dreams. Why? Because we're going to need them to look at this one, to understand visions. Understanding how to approach dreams and visions means we're going to be able to start to really look at this book and then see, again, on that level of our own souls, what's going on. And then realize that is what is creating the stuff in the world. And that's the stuff we're going to look at, rather than the stuff in the world affects us. We often act as if we're little black boxes, empty little boxes that are born here. They get filled with stuff. And if it gets filled with bad stuff, then I'll be bad. And if it fills with good stuff, I'll be good, or something like that. But it's that bad world out there that's doing this to me. And it's that bad world, or even that bad devil, that's made me the way I am. Rather than, no. It's from that first moment of choice It's what I choose then affects the world. And that's why I go back to the first effect, if you will, Adam and Eve. The first effect affected all the rest, and we affect still. And so as we love to look at the books on the book of Revelation, if we love to see the end time stuff, we love to terrify ourselves of it and things, what we're really saying is like, how can this be out there? Because we people have placed it out there. And that's frankly why it is that, if you want to think about it that way, the only real salvation for this world is the transformation of each individual soul. It's not the transformation of governments. It's not the transformation of anything like that. Governments are transformed because there's a bunch of individual souls there making decisions.
Yeah.
There's not some unit that's brain dead, though they seem that way often, in that sense. But rather, they're all individuals, and all the decisions are coming through the soul. That's why we look at it first. Because if you understand it, and what's going on inside of you and the human being on this developmental process, we understand what's going on in the process of coming to a fruition. Now the pattern we want to do is, like I said, what I'm planning to do is like with other seminar things we've done, is I'm going to start to read to you. And I want you to stop me with thoughts, questions, things. I'll have my own questions for you as well, and stuff as we start to ponder these things. But that's why we're going to be utilizing this as a text, and I'll be reading from it. And as I say, this is a text which is kind of meaty in some ways, because it's small in pages. It's only about 142 pages long for the whole book of Revelation and dream interpretation. So that's why we say there's a lot more to drill down for in this and get to as we begin to understand this. So do you have any comments or questions before we just begin the reading?
I have a question. How do you know John was dreaming?
We'll get there right now.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good one. Yes. Primarily because he says it. And that's the real answer, but we'll get to it. Yes. Will we get to that very soon? Let's see. Well, we'll get to. You'll see it when we get there. So I'll start reading, but essentially, well, I'm saying this just so as to repeat it, and you'll guess we'll get here. He says he's having a vision. It is a vision. He's not doing this stuff. He's not walking through and doing it. He's in a cave on Patmos.
But what does that? How does that make it a dream?
Okay, that's what we're getting to.
Okay.
It's a daytime dream, is
Wait,
what they call
I'll
it.
start reading this, yes.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Whenever I approach an interpretation of the book of Revelation, I think I understand a bit more what Job might have felt. Immersed in a field of seemingly incomprehensible terror and horror, I attempt to find some meaning in it, only to be surrounded by advisors and commentaries who tell me this thing and that, few of whom seem to agree, fewer still making any reasonable sense. Probably if you ever read a bunch of things, it's like how many books there are in the book of Revelation, and none of them agree. And so all the arguments just make good movies a lot of times. Job, knowing this same confusion, disregarded the speculative theologians and turned to God for the answer. Like Job, if we are to make any sense of this book, we must return to the source, to the vision or dream itself, which we call the Apocalypse. And that is the true name of the book, if you look in the Greek. Apocalypse, which is the revealing, if you will, in that sense. Apocalypsos. We call it the book of revealings. It's, so if you just looked in the Greek, it would say apocalypse, basically, in the Greek. We call it the Apocalypse. To use the term dream here is not unreasonable. In the Old Testament, there is no clear distinction between a dream and a vision, such as there is in our thinking. To us, visions are often taken as more real than dreams, merely because visions, by our definition, arise during waking consciousness. Since, in recent times, we have degraded the unconscious, the contents of the unconscious are likewise degraded. Therefore, dreams are often dismissed and disregarded. How often have we said to ourselves and others, it is merely a dream? However, in the Old Testament, this distinction is missing. So it is that we might read in the book of Job about pondering the visions of the night, or a dream. That's in Job 33:15. You read, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, while they slumber on their beds. One thing that we'll find as we walk through this, and an important aspect of this question and all of this, is how much we have overvalued this outer life. And I'm going to continue to say overvalued. What is the one thing Jesus said? Said, this stuff is going to pass away. Value what's eternal. This isn't. This is. Value what's eternal. Don't worry even about who can kill your body. Who can kill this? Worry about him. Worry about that. And so it is that we overvalue this. And so nowadays we go, we've made this false differentiation of a vision. I'm awake, I see it. It must be real because I see it while I'm awake. As if my waking time is and then when I can see things out here, is the most real. And once again, we're going to forget by the end of this, hopefully, the more pounded into us, this is not the most real. It's like I was just even saying, the effects that we take as the most real are the effects of something that started in the more real. It's not what you put in. These are all these scriptures. When you get this, you get all these scriptures flying out. It's not what you put in your mouth that matters. It's what comes out of your heart.
Yeah.
That's the sense. Because it just goes in and comes out. That's what Jesus says. Goes in one end, comes out the other end.
Why do we have
But what
eyes?
goes in?
Why do we have eyes? Why do we have ears?
A draw.
They serve some purpose.
They serve a purpose.
That I assume God wanted.
Yes. Here's your friends. Yes, come on in.
Sorry, we
And-
got you
and
started
maybe
at
we could-
7:30.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, we were told that you were told that. So come on in.
Okay,
So maybe
but he
we can
told
move
you.
over one seat.
Yeah, I can move up or.
Oh yeah, why don't you do that? Yes.
Well, I can move up if you want to stay.
Okay,
And
sure.
then you can sit right
Oh,
here.
Well, Diane,
How's that? I'll move up if you like.
And then you can sit together. All right. Okay. Okay, there we go.
I don't mind.
There you go.
Stella.
You write down those, so just as a.
David.
So back to, we were just starting anyhow, getting into the kind of the prelims of this. But that idea as we get this is what we're going to see is that as we're looking at the idea of, we've overvalued the idea of vision and taken it different than the Old Testament, where vision is as if it's only when we're conscious, and we overvalue the outer world then. All these things that Jesus is saying is value the inner world first. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Now, one of the things is that over time, maybe in the last about 150 years especially, we've come to this place of all wanting to be scientists as theologians, and that type of thing. And so everything out here is more real. And so we've always related that way. Even at the point where I don't know if the new one, but when the first translated the New International Version, when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, which is the first real definition in the Greek, they changed it to the kingdom of heaven is among you. And so because it can't be, what do you mean within? There's, that whole thing is there versus it's within you, not just among you. Now it's both in a sense, we're going to say, but that place of valuing the inner first, from which all things then flow. So whether it's Jesus saying that, or Jesus saying, don't worry about what goes in. It's not the outer world that's the problem. It's what comes out of you. That those are all this type of thing we're going to get about that says vision and dream are essentially the same thing. One just happens while you're awake. One while you're asleep. And if and on a clinical level of that, we see it very clearly with sleep deprivation. when people take amphetamines in order to stay awake, students did this to study, they stay awake for 2 nights studying, they take speed in order to keep going, or tons of caffeine. Now it's Red Bull, forget the amphetamines, take a lot of Red Bull and you'll stay up. By the 3rd day, you're having an acute psychosis. Now what is an acute psychosis? It's just the dream world breaking through into the outer world. That's all it is. You're starting to actually have dreams while you're awake because we have to dream. And so it just breaks through because you've gotten so degraded in your consciousness that now you don't know if you're awake or asleep because you need it so badly. So that sense is proving that idea of vision and dream. So you'd say, well, you're awake, so you're having a vision. But it's the same thing, but the description is just like people dreaming and stuff. So the same, it's the same thing, it's the same phenomena that we're talking about. So any comments about that first before just into the, one thing we're doing is as we're doing this, reading and commenting as we read through the book. Okay. 3rd paragraph. There are certain dreams and visions that we do take more concretely than others. There is a sense or an experience of the visionary dreamer that is distinguishable, allowing us to know when to interpret an experience in a fairly concrete, literal manner, in distinction to a symbolic interpretation. I discuss this distinction in detail in the work Revelations and Possession, and will not take time here to pursue that line of thinking. However, if we did take the time to review that discussion, we would find that we'd be correct in approaching the book of Revelation in a more symbolic manner rather than attempting to take it all literally. And one thing, most people don't take it absolutely literally. Even when Pat Robertson in 1979 was predicting the end in 1984, that obviously didn't happen. But it was like he took the scorpion-tailed beings with tail of a scorpion and fire coming from its mouth and all of this. He goes, those are Russian tanks. That because it looks like it would be. It's kind of reasonable. They have anti-aircraft missiles on their backs. And it seemed very reasonable at the time, except it didn't happen. That's the only thing. Since it didn't happen, we go, oh, that's not there. Unless he was thinking of future. But even that's not literal. Because you don't see a literal horse with mouth-breathing horse with scorpion tails. That would be literal, concrete. Symbolic is, what does that mean? So Pat Robertson said, what does it mean to have, this thing on the back of this horse, these Stinger, it might be Stinger missiles. Oh, what is the mouth? Oh, it's the barrel of the tank. So when, so we all already take it symbolic to a large degree, but there are times when we go, when is it concrete? Like when Gabriel comes, in that sense, and we'd say Mary was having a vision, and that of Gabriel, and Gabriel comes and says, Mary, you're going to give birth to a son. Joseph has a dream, says Mary is pregnant by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Ghost has come over her and is pregnant, and you'll call his name Jesus. Now, those were to be taken concretely and literally. But there is different ways of knowing that. That you go, okay, I need to just take that rather than symbolic. And the big difference is in the difference when you experience something as is versus as if. So that's kind of the difference. Mary was there and it would be like, it's not like, well, it's as if Gabriel showed up to me. No, Gabriel. Joseph did not wake up from the dream and go, it was as if an angel came to me. No, he goes, an angel came. He actually knew an angel came. So often when, we have a dream, we go, it's as if. This is what was happening. It was, it was as if I was flying that night, but I was flying, but it was but you take it differently. You wake up and you go, it's as if. Mary and Joseph did not wake up and go, I was as if, There is that difference that people have with this type of thing. In that sense, since I've said in the book here that, but it is this sense of going, okay, what were the things? Well, the first thing, that was the first and most obvious, is the person experiences a voice, a vision, or a feeling as coming from outside him or herself. Now, that's something that starts to tell you how to look at a vision. Another important aspect is it's spontaneous, immediate, rather than subsequent interpretation. Now, you'll often hear this. It was like people will get prophetic, utterances, and then they will actually say, "Well, my interpretation of that is." When you have that step to interpretation, you have just moved away from taking it concretely, and so you go, okay, that's more in the visionary, dream world, than it is in the concrete vision. It also comes across with just an overpowering awe. I mean, can you imagine? It's not like actually, one of the things that got me to write this book was when I was told that they would come to me. I was saying, how do I know this man had a vision of Jesus? Because he was saying, and he was a church leader, and so he has a vision of Jesus, and Jesus is telling him all these things, and I'm going, he's a good church leader, and and I like him, he's a nice guy, but how can this real? And so I'm asking people who said they'd seen Jesus before, and they said, well, actually, we'd ask you. I'm going, oh, great, thanks. So it's up to me to figure it out. But that was but in that sense of that, this what had led to my doubt was this person is telling about his vision of Jesus, and as he's telling these things, right at the moment he cracks a joke. Well, you're not going to be able to crack a joke only about a week or so after this vision, and it's like and so in that sense it was like and then Jesus said, "You tell." I mean, that's what it was like. Rather than making Jesus like, "Hey, yo, man."
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa. That there's just something off with that, because it's like people who say, when I go to heaven, I've got so many questions for God. When you get to heaven in front of God, you are not going to have any questions. You're going to be going, yes, I'm so glad to be here. It's just, forget the questions. That's it. But that's that sense of saying, well, you really don't know what you're talking about when you say that. That type of thing. It's a nice statement, but the reality is, no. I'm just kidding. And so the same thing with this. So I'm saying it has a sense of what's being called by this author of the book called The Idea of the Holy. He called the word numinous. It's like luminous, but with numen, which is spirit in the Latin, in that sense. So numinous. And so if something is numinous means, wow. If it was luminous, it would be overwhelmed with light. This is overwhelmed with that spirit, sense of a spirit. It's like, and you know that when you've had a big dream before, or if you actually have had some experience, this big spiritual experience, you feel and sometimes it comes with a negative one of those, like but it's something like that is going to be there. Another two things would be a fourth is unusual clarity to the experience. When people have had a vision, it sticks with them their life. People have had not that objective visions like this. I mean, I talk about the difference between we're looking at big things, personal dreams. Like dreams, a lot of times you have every night is just about you, versus big things that are bringing messages. That's what these are, and stuff. Personal ones, they degrade. You even forget your dreams. You don't forget a vision. You don't forget if there was a visitation by an angel. You remember that the rest of your life. And so, and yes, and there's often light associated with these things, either shadows or luminosity. That's why artists often have halos around saints and all of this. You see medieval artists always putting there was a light. And so when you have these visions, people have lights or shadows. When people have seen demons, they say it's like there's almost like a dark shadow around them. Or there was a shadow in the room. Something of that nature comes about. So those things, when you start to apply them to the book of Revelation, you start to go, well, there's something big here, but it's not to be taken concretely. Because these things are happening to John. After a while, he's seeing them. But it's only in the beginning that we actually have an angel show up to him. You know, at that point we go, oh, this is concrete. And so the book of Revelation is a good one for actually showing the different forms of visions there are. Because the first vision he gets is of an angel comes to him and says, I'm going to tell you these things, and I want you to write this down. Well, what symbolically does write that down mean? No, it means write it down. You know,
No.
this is, yeah, it makes sense. But then later, we'll get to what he sees, in this sense. And as he sees these things, we're going to be actually going, okay, now this is not being told, write this, do this, until other times. I'm going to get the interpretation. So. So how are y'all doing with this so far?
Good.
Good, good. Okay. So, if you will, imagine the Apostle John walking into a psychotherapy consulting room, sitting down and relating a troubling dream he recently experienced. How would we then deal with him? Most likely, seeing the potency of this dream, we would begin a dream analysis. Typically, to understand a dream, and this is where we must start before we can get into the depths of the book itself. Typically, to understand a dream, we must see that it is not some confusion of images, but that it is most often coherently organized as a story. Now that, most of you may wake up in the morning and go, right. You know, you don't know what I dreamt last night. That it's gobbledygook. First thing you got to realize is, no, it isn't. It's not gobbledygook. It's just not speaking English. It's
language
to,
of the soul.
to Israel or Jewish
that
church,
idea once
synagogue.
again,
You're going to
we
go.
go,
He speaks
you know,
Hebrew,
we have
and it's
very
biblical
much
Hebrew,
prejudice
not
and
modern
bias.
Hebrew. Or you go
Our
over
bias is that God
into the
speaks
Greek
English.
Orthodox churches, and
And
so
he speaks
and
Greek.
stuff. You go. No, he speaks Latin.
Mm-hmm.
No, he speaks Russian and Syriac and Slavonic, and it's like, and so everybody's expecting that, and so in that type of thing, and demanding that God speak in these languages, rather than human history has always been the language of story. If you notice, Jesus does not speak theology. Paul does. Paul's a good philosopher who learned all of his good philosophical language. You do not find Jesus outlining theology. He tells story. Can you really describe to us the kingdom of God? Well, kingdom of God is going to be peace in all these places. No, kingdom of God is like a woman who lost what? You know, it's like, you know, can you tell me about the kingdom of God? Yeah, it's like a man went out sowing seed. And the disciples going, you know, can you just make it plain, because we're in a Greek philosophical world now. It's like, yeah, that's your prejudice, but that's not the Old Testament. The Old Testament is almost all story. We all go, can we make it coherent? That's our scientific philosophical bias. That's not the soul. The language of the soul is not rational. That's something we'll be able to talk more and more about. It's not rational. And thankfully it isn't. Because true rationality would say God doesn't exist. We live in a truly rational scientific world. And to the true scientist, secular atheism is the most reasonable explanation. Evolution is the most reasonable explanation. Unless you go to the irrational or non-rational world, which is better, which is most of life. And most of life is non-rational. And so it is that we actually say this sense of living out of the non-rational is the world of our dreams. And how do you actually listen and understand the non-rational? Story. So Jesus brought us stories to understand the spiritual life in the kingdom. And that's that sense of story is how the dream comes, because it's really that ancient part of us, that even on a metaphorical level, we know this in the brain. the brain, that reasonable, rational part of us, takes up some part of the frontal lobes and some parts, the other parts of the brain at its surface. The vast majority of your brain is not in that rational world. That's why they call it, this is kind of the human part, which can have reason. The rest is the mammalian and the reptilian brain, people call it. Because really down back in the brainstem, all you're doing is going, that's it. Brain stems only really know how to react. That's it. And that's what they call it the reptilian brain, because you basically look like it's shared with the reptiles type of thing. And it's like that area, which is just fight, flight, freeze. And that's all it does. Then you get to the mammalian brain, which has a lot of emotions and cognitions and visuals and stuff like that and things. But the thin little layer is raisin. That's why people thought, they stopped doing lobotomies back in the 60s and 70s, because they go, well, maybe we can take care of this part by going into the brain of the frontal lobe. And what you get not a vegetable, you just get a dog. The person's like, come on, puppy. That type of thing. And person's basically now lost their ability to reason. And when you realize that we're more than neurology and physiology, that we are spirits that have souls and bodies, that we are essentially the soul and body together, then you realize that I'm just using this as an illustration of what's also in the soul. That reasonable, rational part is minuscule compared to the rest of us, which is non-rational, which is why I've called the rest of us, like, if you think of your soul like a large ocean, that reasonable, rational part of yourself is a minnow swimming around in there. And there's sharks and blue whales and everything else in there, and that stuff. But this part is the minuscule part. You want to get in touch with the rest? That's visions and dreams that God's working on you.
So, Father Greg, when we get into visions and dreams, do we get into this right brain, left brain thing where visions and dreams come out of the one side of our brain, the language side and that kind of thing, and symbols? Because where one side is more rational or linear and the other side is more language and dream-oriented and creative. Does that play into this at all?
Well, I think it would play into it, but I'm not sure to what degree. Primarily because we're essentially saying, in many ways, and we'll see this, that once you've entered your dream world, which is the same as that if you're deep prayer world, that's when you get visionary and stuff. Once you've entered that world, you've left the world of physiology. So you're going to have essentially these experiences, we'd say, outside the body. It doesn't go away when you're dead, when the body dies. That's why we say the soul lives on. That's why we say that you're essentially, and the word essential can be translated with the much more Latin term of spiritus. We even say it, it's the spirit of the law, which means the essence of it. That's the spirit of the matter, the essence of it. So we can say, essentially, you are a soul, an invisible part, and a body, a visible part. And that at one point, the visible part departs. But the invisible doesn't. And that's why you get people in near-death experiences that's, on the surgery table, all of a sudden they're standing there watching the doctors work on them. Who's watching them work on them? It's like, we even say it. What part of you is saying, my body? Shouldn't the body be saying, my soul? Or even I say, my soul, my body, my soul. Who's the me that's saying that? Well, it's partially the rational part, but there's actually a deeper part, which is the essential part that says, I have these things, and then, so we even say it in our language, we know this, that there's something so much more. So but being that we are also physical creatures, our brains are going to play into it to some degree. But that non-rational side is really just saying we've moved beyond this little veneer of what we call the reasonable me. And most of us know we don't have that. The bigger part of ourselves is the not reasonable me.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says it in such a beautiful way, which is, that which what I would do, the reasonable me, I don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because there's another part of me that's fighting. But that I don't want to do, I do. Oh, darn it. I guess that blue whale is a lot bigger than the minnow. And so,
Mhm.
and frankly, with that kind of metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
is what we're going to be going through in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Learning on how individually to deal with the blue whales,
Mm-hmm.
and cosmically how those actually come out
Mm-hmm.
through our corporate,
Mhm.
reactions and actions and the way we are. And so, and as a and as a kind of a commercial, so it's not so totally just theoretical sounding. What do I mean by both individual and corporate? It's like when we get down to about a couple more chapters, when we actually get to chapter 3 in the Seven Seals,
Mm-hmm.
the first horseman of the apocalypse, as we love to call them, comes out, and what is it? It's, remember, it's a white horse, right? And it comes out, a white horse, and on him is sitting a conqueror that goes about conquering.
Mm-hmm.
So what have we just met in ourselves first? A conquering, we could be literal, conquering, or a power complex. The desire to dominate and have power.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of the first things we actually meet. We'll talk about this more as we get there, and we'll get in depth there. But in the sense, where do we meet that first in life? About when you're 2 years old. When you finally have the power of what?
To say no.
Your sphincter.
Oh.
That's what gives you the power to say no. You haven't been able to say no up to that point because your parents can just, no, I'm not going to pick you up if you carry you away. You're powerless. I mean, except in we won't get into
Wait till
societal
they're
things.
3.
But that sense of how, but that sense of going, that place when all of a sudden you are able to withhold pooping, which you've not been able to do before. You're powerless. It just happens, doesn't it? That's why you have diapers. Because it just happens, and you wet the bed just because it happens. You don't have bodily control. And finally you get control, and now I've got power. And I can say no. And I love my power. It's wonderful power. It's called in developmental psychology primary narcissism. And then it gets recapitulated. Happens again. When? When you become a teenager.
Teenagers.
That's right. You get to secondary narcissism. And then if it doesn't go away, you become a narcissist. That's it. But we all have it. It's that idea. But it's that desire for power. Now, even that, I'm giving you all these commercials for the future here, too. We realize things keep cycling onto themselves. Life is a spiral. So it's like we're climbing this mountain in the book of Revelation to the top. And so we meet power. We meet the first horseman in one way, as power, which we'll meet again in the trumpets and all. But it's this different ways the power comes at us. But the first one is just this primitive power. I'm in control. And we go, what happens if I don't get hold of that? I get Stalins, and I get Hitlers, and all of this. And so it's how do we deal with these things is what we're going to be looking at. Because cosmically, it's people that have not dealt with the white horseman, end up being the tyrants we keep looking at. Is that the Antichrist? No, he's just another one of the white horseman's cohort.
Sounds like the horse sounds like a war horse.
It is. Well, that's what we'll see. Now, this is for dream interpretation as we get there. What is a white horse? We kind of told this by the book of Revelation, but still, what is a white horse? What are your associations to white horses?
Knights,
Yes?
Noble.
noble cause, at least from someone's point of view.
Yeah. Noble, yeah. Knights, noble causes,
Power, I mean, they're a
power.
big animal.
Beauty.
Especially, and we're going to be looking at,
Triumph.
triumph,
Victory.
okay.
Victory.
Yeah.
And they're under our control. The horse is. Sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you also get the white horse, especially that period of time, but any period. Who leads it but the conqueror, the leader, the king?
Mm-hmm.
Kings ride white horses. Emperors, Caesar would ride a white horse. The head of the legion would ride it. This is the conqueror. That you get the good big horse, and always know that, and that's the sense and the power of it. It's the conqueror. So why a horse? we'd be going, white horses are ridden by conquerors. We'll later find that these symbols can be neutral, but where else do we find a white horse in the book of Revelation, if anybody remembers?
Christ
Jesus.
tries it.
Christ rides
Yeah.
it. He comes from heaven, the second coming in that sense, with the saints behind him riding a white horse as a conqueror, whose white robes are stained with blood.
Right.
That sense. So we get white horses as conquerors. Now that's as we get, like I say, as the image of saying, using this now as an illustration of our three-level thing. White horse, conqueror. Where do we find that in our lives? We're told, basically, it's going to be one of the first things we have to deal with, our own desires for power.
Mm.
And when we see people caught up in power complexes, and that is a political statement today, we see that so much, people caught up in power complexes, we know they're in a very primitive, infantile place. Because it's just the beginning of the journey. It's the first seal. It's not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of the path to deal with power complexes, of especially power over others and conquering the world and being politically in power, of a Caesar, or like I say, or a Napoleon, or a Stalin, or all of these people that we always say power corrupts, but it's that idea of I'm caught into a primitive place myself, and then when I'm caught into it, and if enough of us are caught into it together, the world gets caught up into the white horseman. And we go, So it's not like, we're watching, when's he coming out? It's the sense of he's been out for quite a while. It's in our lives, and it's in this world. But we need to learn, and that's what we'll learn from this. I've skipped ahead, so we'll be coming back to it. We'll know some ways of how to deal with this. Personally, and once we know how to deal with our own power complex, how to react to it in the world out there, to help actually manifest the kingdom of heaven, rather than, that's why this book, the book of Revelation, is taken as a scary book when it's so positive. It is a positive book of hope, unless you don't like God. For the Christian, it's a positive book of hope.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't want to walk with God, it is really miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll throw out one more example, is when the fall of Babylon happens.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? There is moaning and groaning everywhere. All the merchants are going, oh, it's gone down. The artisans, oh, the musicians, oh, it's miserable. The world, Babylon has fallen. All the merchants, everybody's miserable. And what happens in heaven? The saints in heaven are going, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And we're going, no, don't take my toys. And it's like, and that's when we start to realize, oh, that's a deeper level of this development that's going to come about. We're not there by that point in our reading. How are we doing?
I got my stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll continue.
Never know what Christ is.
So I'll, that's what we're only working through. Do you need? So now I left off, and I went off on a beautiful 5-minute break back to the story. Typically, to understand a dream, we must see that it's not some fusion of images, but that it is most often coherently organized as a story. To view it as a story is convenient. Likewise, the dream is to be seen as a poem, a message spoken in a manner foreign to our linear, logical way of understanding. Most laypersons have a difficult time with poetry. By that I mean English literature laypersons, that type of thing. We enjoy poems that seem easy to comprehend, but so many are just the opposite. Most poets compose their works using images and phrasing that leaves us initially scratching our heads in bewilderment. However, the poet has composed a work that has meaning, one that can be seen as we flow through the poem from beginning to middle to end. Likewise, the dream is to be seen as such a poem, just such a story told in a manner foreign to our linear, logical way of speaking. That's why I would say that the majority of dreams are much more like poetry. And if you read somebody's poetry, like I say, you just pick up somebody's poem, you go, I have no idea what they're talking about. They're nuts, you know. It's that type of thing. I mean, well, this is meaningless. You know, that type of thing. You know, we like poems which really just are rhymes. You know, everybody gets that one. But that's, you know, poetry, where this image comes out. And so, no, the dreams are poets more often. It's easier when we have a story. To understand a dream, we look at it as we would any other story. A story which has a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. The beginning often sets the stage, giving us the context and the setting, as well as introducing the primary characters. Then the story unfolds and we observe the process of moving toward a climax and a conclusion. The climax and conclusion often then reveal to us both the meaning of the story, the point we are to gather from it, as well as the method of moving toward realizing that meaning. As much as seeing it in the form of story or poetry, we can also further understand the dream as a classical drama. And for those familiar with dramatic structure, it initially presents the setting and protagonists, followed by the development of the plot, leading to the culmination or climax, and finally the resolution. Similarly, we can observe in a dream drama such a statement of setting and protagonists, development of story, and the third climactic stage, which culminates in a resolution. That's one way we'll actually say it would be useful to approach most dreams. When you have a dream, just don't go, what did that mean? And then grab the only important part. Go, what's the setting? Somebody goes, I had a dream of being in a house, and the house was really dark. And in that dark house, somewhere inside in the basement, there's this growling sound. And then, you know, right now we're going, growling sound. Ooh, I wonder what that is. You know, no, what's the setting? A house. What house? You know, so this is a setting of a house. It's not a field. It's not up in the air. There's some reason for this. You know, if you were writing a play, you'd set the setting. You know, that type of thing. So you want to be able to grab hold of these things. That's what we're going to be needing for the Book of Revelation. First, we have to get the setting and the figures involved and things of that nature. Also, that this idea of structure, the climax often brings, and so it's often important this, if you ever do dream work with me, I'd be asking you, what did you feel during it? What's the feeling? What would you feel at the end? What's your emotion? Well, how did it end? You know, that sense. Because we often get caught up with the thing that we either know, I dreamt that last night because I watched this TV show. You know, no, that sense. Or we get caught up with just, like I say, the growling in the basement. Oh, you know, that type of thing. Rather than the whole thing. We need the whole story. Because the end is where we're trying to move. It's a story trying to move us someplace. And kind of help us to get some resolution of some type. One of the things about nightmares is that you wake up before the story ends. Mm-hmm. And that's why it stays a nightmare. Nightmares really, and recurrent nightmares, will keep coming until you finish the story. And so it's like, I'm telling a story, I can't hear the end of that. And he's like, no, you need to. You know, if you're watching The Old Wizard of Oz, you need to see the Wicked Witch of the West melt. You don't want to leave them caught up in her castle. You know, and that's it. But that's what we do. It's like, oh no, and the demon monkeys are jumping all over them. They got this scary guy. Ah! Wake up. I guess I'm going to have that one again. You know, and that's the sense. I mean, that we actually, dreams are healing in that way. If you get to the resolution, it's a deeper part of yourself where that often brings resolution. We're talking about the dream of Book of Revelation in an even deeper way, but most dreams are actually just coming from your own soul. Then we've already looked at this and said when I read that thing, is this what we're going to call the Book of Revelation is more of an objective dream that actually speaks to people in general and to the world. But most dreams are just your own soul, and you can almost see a parallel again with dreams and your immune system. You know, you have something go wrong in your body. God doesn't intervene. He's already given you the body. So he doesn't, it's not like, oh look, they're sick, I better send an angel to tell the virus go away. You know, that's not going to happen usually. It's only when it doesn't work that we're all of a sudden praying, God, send your Holy Spirit to take the, because my immune system's not doing it. But he goes, I gave you a body with a good immune system in it. And so you get viruses and bacteria, your immune system will come out and start to work in order to balance and bring you back to health. Well, the dream sometimes acts as a psychological, a soul-like immune system. That you're out of balance in life, something's wrong, and the other part that you're not aware of, just like you're not aware of your immune system until all of a sudden you get a fever, then you're aware of it because it's kind of come in and gone, oh, I've got a fever, my immune system must have kicked in overdrive to get rid of this and get inflammations. No, I'm not aware of my immune system, neither am I most often aware until I dream of what's going on behind in the deeper parts of my soul, that non-rational part. But it comes to bring balance, and to give directions in this way. So even one way is like we say the book of Revelation as a dream is going to come to show us how to bring ourselves back to perfect health or to be perfect. Remember, that's what the word means in Matthew. Jesus said, be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect. And the word, essentially, perfect health. The word is to be completed, to be restored. The word, the Greek comes from the root Greek of teleos, and teleos means to be completed in the end. Be ye therefore teleos, perfect. You could just translate whole, healed, fully sanctified. Whatever would be the word, this is what it is. And the book of Revelation, being a dream, is going to show us that thing. That's why you just don't want to stop at the fun points. Everybody stops at the seals. Though we don't hardly even get to the trumpets in the movies, and that type of thing. And then it's like, oh no, here comes the Antichrist. Where is he? Who is the Antichrist? Every generation will know has found their own Antichrist. But that sense is we don't stop there. We keep moving. We keep moving along. So as we're interpreting a dream, a nightmare will be one where you've not gotten to the climax, or at the climax you wake up because you're scared. And so, in that sense, don't wake somebody else up if they're having a nightmare. Let them sleep through it. It's like, you were having a nightmare. Thanks a lot. Now I'm going to have it again. Well, you were moaning and screaming. If they're hitting you, if you're married, then boom, boom, stop them. Okay, get out of bed. Just let them finish. But that sense. But don't wake yourself. If you wake up from it, I got to go back to it. I'm going back to sleep. I got to get the ending. This is one of the interesting things found by a psychiatrist at the University of Dallas when he was doing work with Vietnam vets then, at that time. It's about 25, 30 years ago that he's really doing a lot of this work, that find out that post-traumatic stress was a lot of times people weren't waking up from the dream. And so he had this one person that had continued to wake up as, like, thinking that the guy had done one of these things, when going through the villages and shot, a mom and child came out from the thing, and, there they are, riddled and dead in front of him, and he's always, you'd see that scene, but then got him to sleep through it. Don't keep waking up, go to the end. And that dream went to a conclusion where he actually was going, I'm resolved, and didn't have it ever again, and the trauma actually mitigated for the guy. Dreams are trying to bring balance and wholeness and healing to us, like a psychic immune system, in many ways. Now back to our classical drama. For example, we can look at Shakespeare's King Lear. Here we have a story which begins with a king who, wishing to test his daughter's love and loyalty, divides his kingdom amongst them. The story then develops with treachery and suffering, and climaxes with the deep suffering of Lear's one faithful daughter, who is true of heart, but is unrecognized by her father, because his desire for power has blinded him. The character of the fool within the play is the purveyor of wisdom, as he concludes the story with the assertion, It is sad when one grows old before one grows wise. We see the context of the story as a family in which power and greed are the guiding principles. This is how we start to interpret it. Look at the context. Family where power and greed are guiding principles. Asking them about the characters. The main characters are the father and his daughters. The outcome is suffering and disaster, where true love and loyalty are unrecognized. In the progression of the story, we see love manipulated in the service of greed and power. Knowing the end, we can understand the beginning and the middle. The end tells us that we are in need of wisdom, because the unwise path leads to despair, destruction, and loss of love and trust. What is that unwise path? Just looking at the story, we can get this. The unwise path is to test another's love, to place power and acquisition of things over love and trust of the beloved. So the playgoer may walk away from King Lear with the message. This would be the same message if this was a dream. Trust those you love and trust their love. Do not test it. And value love above all things. That's a play, which could be just as much been a dream. King Lear, written and performed in beautiful yet archaic language, is still more comprehensible than the average dream. Mm-hmm. Even so, the process of interpretation is much the same. Here we have, with the book of Revelation, the Apostle Paul.
John.
Oh, that guy too. Here we have the Apostle John sitting before us in our consultation room, waiting for us to help him with his disturbing dream. The first thing that we would do is to ask him to tell us the whole dream, as best he could remember. So remember this, So John begins, so we get now into the story of the book of Revelation. John begins, telling us that it was on a certain Sunday, while he was living the life of an exile on the island of Patmos, not far off the coast from his adopted hometown of Ephesus in Turkey, he fell into a trance and had a dream. He heard a voice telling him to write down what he was about to experience and to send it to 7 churches. He then tells of how he saw a heavenly scene with Christ, clothed with the attributes of deity, standing in the midst of 7 lampstands and holding 7 stars. With this, we are immediately given our initial context. We have the setting and the principal characters. The setting is heavenly. So we already know that this is a transcendent message. He didn't dream that he was in his home, at home. He didn't dream he was in his living room watching TV, which he couldn't have done. Or just, back in Ephesus reading a book, back at church. He's in heaven. So already we start to say, what's heaven? It's transcendent. So the dream is already telling us a transcendent image. It is not just about mundane, everyday life. We already know that now from the context. And this is how you have to start. Once again, I'm going to emphasize, don't skip ahead in the dream or you'll miss these things. So now we know this is about transcendent things, we're not just mundane. Many of our dreams relate to questions or concerns that relate to living our daily lives well. This one relates to the deeper inner life, the life of the Spirit, the transcendent life. So now we already get our sense there. The principal characters are John himself, the resurrected and glorified Jesus, and 7 churches. There is also an angel who, as an intermediary, transmits the message from Jesus to John. As is the way with angels, he then takes a back seat to the message to be delivered, and we hear little of him again. When the dreamer is represented in a dream, this image most often relates to the conscious identity or ego. We'll speak more about this identity or ego at another opportunity. But this is a first important point, which is when you dream of yourself, it's realizing, like I'm saying, you're so much bigger than what you think you are. That when you see your body in the dream or yourself and you're seeing through yourself, you're seeing through that conscious part of you that we actually call your personality. Which, now this is the complex part, well, this is where I want you to keep coming back to me going, huh? Because there's a difference between you as an individual and you as a personality. Personality is what you just are aware of, what you often want to be. You know, everybody sitting here wants to be good people. You have good personalities. But I bet you have another part of you that doesn't really fit with your personality. You know, sometimes called the shadow side, that side of yourself that you pushed away. You know, that part of you that, you know, say, there before the grace of God go I, and it's still hiding back there. You know, that part that you say, I don't want anybody ever to see, the part that is embarrassing to you. You know, that's not your personality, is it? That's not your identity. You know, it's like, that's not me. You know, that's what I often call the when I say the shadow side, I call it the Jimmy Swaggart effect, which is was like, what's his personality? You know, and I'll say this in a facetious way. I am a holy man. You know, that sense. You know, that sense. And he believed it. He's not a charlatan. He goes, this is holiness, and holiness means you don't even admit to some of the bad stuff in your life. Well, so his personality is of a holy man. Well, unfortunately, that's not who we are in totality. As an individual, I'm also made up of the rest of that ocean. My minnow, if you will, is my personality. The rest of the ocean exists. And so, in Jimmy Swaggart's ocean lived a guy that liked to see naked women. Now, you know something? On a neutral level, most men like naked women. That's a neutral level. If he had just gone, you know, I'm a holy man, and every so often I have thoughts about naked women, he'd be like, I'm not going to do anything about it. Good for you. That's basically what Jesus says. He doesn't say you're not going to think it. He says don't entertain it. Those who basically look on a woman and lust after her have committed adultery. Oh, it's that lust after part. It's not the part that's going, oh, look, yeah, I could. No, never mind. Okay, it's fine and dandy. And that other part, that blue whale of, you know, potential lust that's going around doesn't swallow the minnow. Well, that blue whale gets really angry and when it's outside of consciousness, that blue whale actually has a lot more power because you don't even know it. It's like naming the demon gives it, you more power over it. That's why in an exorcism you're always saying, name yourself, demon. Now I've got the demon's name, I got some power, and control over it. But without it, I don't know what's going on. Blue whales out there. And then all of a sudden the blue whale of liking naked women got even more. And now I'm going to do it in perverse ways. Now I'm going to go and get the prostitutes and have them strip in motel rooms in front of me. And it's like, oh, I got caught. The blue whale swallowed me, I got caught. Now I'm a sinful man. No, it's like you just, deal with it. I often say, this is where these, kind of I've dated myself here with these examples of Jimmy Swaggart, because another televangelist of the times was the Jim Robison, who about the same period of time got caught beating up his wife. And he went into kind of a rehab and came out and said, not that I'm a sinner, he goes, this is who I am, I've got to keep an eye on this. In my metaphor, there's a blue whale in me still. I just learned some techniques and not letting it take over. And so my wife's going to be on the show with me from now on, and we're going to, and people are going to go, we don't
Plus, she bought a gun.
Yeah, but okay, that would keep him in line. But but that sense of what we're dealing with, we're saying, is like this sense of being able to get hold of this and realize this is not, when you dream of yourself, you're dreaming only of that rational part. I've called the minnow, the personality, but there's so much more to you that you got. And if you want a biblical statement for that, it's then kind of get what I'm saying now, and then read Paul when he says, I know a man that went to the third heaven. Now, in the body or not, I'm not sure. Well, it's like this idea is that the personality, who you think you are, when it's being looked at from the individual, from where you are in the end, it's like third person. I know this man, I see him, the minnow down there. and he went to the third heaven. But I can't even speak about I, because I is down there, and this is this, and it's like, wow, it's so mystical. But that's it. We're beyond ourselves. Paul had gone so deep, that sense, that, and into the place where that, and that's that sense of, we were saying, God wants to know the real you. He doesn't care about your minnow that much. And really, he wants to know the full you. And so Paul, is the full him, is there in heaven. And he goes, I even lost track of whether I had a body or not.
Okay. Can I back this up a little bit?
Yes, you may.
What you're talking about.
Yes.
So, you're talking about personality,
Yes.
and I may be incorrect in my construct here, but it sounds like we know parts of our personality and parts of ourselves, but there's other parts of ourselves that we want to either deny or repress.
Right.
And that sometimes when we dream, in our dreams, maybe we're bringing out that part that we're repressing or denying that God wants to deal with so that we can be whole and healed
Yes.
of that part that we push down or we repress. Would that be an accurate way of looking at that?
Yes. One way of, exactly, this is now I get to play with my little screen here. One way of looking at it is if I say we're that circle, right? Let's say I'm the circle. This is me. I'm going to put God outside of me, which is a wise thing to do. Oh, what's going on? Oh, I see what's going on. I've got that little thing there. Let's put God elsewhere. He doesn't want to.
We do that too.
Oh, I see what's happening there. Yes, we did it. But God's outside. That's what you're saying. Now, I'm going to say this. Not even the center, but that sense right here. Maybe I'll put it at the center. I'm going to put a little circle right here. Let me make it a little bigger so I can do this. Now, in that circle, that is what I'm going to call today the ego. It's what psychology uses, but basically it's both the Greek and the Latin word merely for I.
Okay.
That's where we get it. That's why it's called that, ego. It's the, first person singular nominative of in Latin and Greek for I. This is I, but that's just me right there. And so I'm going to now move this because it makes it a little bit more graphic when I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put that over there now. And what I'm going to say is that, frankly, actually, just if you're all drawing, I'm sorry. I'm going to put it over there near to God. But now, this is God, and I'm also going to say the outer world here. Like for me, it's all you and all everything else, right? Well, most of the time, we are only focused out here towards the outer world. That type of thing. When we go to sleep, I'm going to say this, it's as if there's another part of myself. This part of my consciousness goes to the outer world. It goes to sleep, and this part turns inward.
Okay.
To the rest of me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to say there's a center to me, which is the image of God. It's kind of an arbitrary statement. God relates to my center.
Mm-hmm.
It's that psalm and stuff that says, deep speaks unto deep in the sound of your waterfalls. God is not really interested in speaking to my ego.
Okay.
That's the sense. So, yes. So it happens both ways. According to you, what you're saying is, I am right now having my psychic immune system is trying to get a hold of me too and say, you're really out of balance, consciousness. And there's a lot of things we want to do, and I'm going to come to you in a dream trying to do this just as a psychic thing. God also works by coming within and kind of moving us, in that sense. It's, how, you say, how is it that I would find inner healing and stuff? God enters in and starts to move those things that we call unconscious.
Okay.
What is the unconscious? It's just that which I'm not conscious of.
Mm-hmm.
And so if all I'm looking at is the outer world all the time, then I'm basically unconscious of this whole rest of this circle. That's my unconscious. The more I turn inward, the more aware I become of myself and of God speaking to me in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say this, the place where we go, a lot of Eastern religion stuff get wrong. They say that inner thing is God.
Mm.
We're saying it's the image of God within, that he placed within us. And that God, so that but when I do get to know myself so well, I will be able to start to hear God and understand God and relate to God more. Because he's relating to the depths, calling us there. Just as our dreams are calling us, get it together. And the like. And so in order to come into this place of wholeness. So yes, those things are happening within you that are coming from the dream, both that are being both stimulated by your own, I call it psychic immune system, and as well by God. But there's two different things there. It's not always like God's not always just interacting with us any more than I could use the word other healing, any more than the fact that he made us to be healed and whole people, And so, but sometimes special intervention's necessary. So right now we're going, God is intervening in a different way with John, as John turns inward. Does that start to answer what you were saying or not?
Well, somewhat, yeah. I'm trying to get hold of the complexity of personality and how our dreams reflect parts of us that we don't know and parts of us that we already do know. And I don't know if that overlaps to what you just said, or, so that...
Well, the parts of us we don't know, well, the parts of us we do know, and I'm going to make this a little bit more so I can draw it bigger. This is way out of context of ourselves, but let's say that's, again, me. That is me, the I. And so I am actually pretty much, and now I'm going to draw that line again down the middle, and I'm going to say this is what I'm aware of.
Right.
Which then is personality.
Okay.
Well, that's bad writing, but you get the word. Somewhat. That one half of that minnow is my personality.
Okay.
Who am I? This is me, the individual.
Everything else?
Yeah. The totality, including that, my consciousness.
Yeah.
But I'm only conscious of this one little part.
Okay.
Then there's parts of me that I'm also conscious of, but I don't like, and I don't show you.
Right.
So your shadow.
I usually show you mine. It irritates you, I know. But it's like, would you just put the mask on, please? It's like, but I mean that sense of
Right.
that idea that it's not where we are conscious. And then there's parts we're not even quite conscious of.
Right.
Like when I use that example of the Jimmy Swaggart thing.
Right.
I'd say that, right outside here, I'm going to draw I'll draw a triangle, let's say, and call that, I'm going to call it just sexuality. And now, sexuality is neutral. It's how I deal with it. Is it dealt with in a loving way? Then we call it love. If it's dealt with in a way that uses another person, I call it lust. But it's just sexuality. Now, but that sense is out there. But if I might then own part of that, say, no, I'm a holy person. But there is another part that says, no, I'm just, like women would say, men are just pigs. Sometimes things, well, there's a pig there too somewhere, and I'm not going to be that pig, and stuff of that nature. But I'm aware of those things in that sense. But those things that I'm not, you're saying, so personality is that who I think I am and want to be. But in the sense of all the rest, it's in the individual. And so I have two ways, basically, of starting to get hold of that other. And the most common for us is the dream. I put this side to sleep, which is dealing with the outer world, and then it goes in.
Okay.
And that's what, and so often feel, just think about your dreams, how often you think you're looking at something. You're watching it. Just like I'm watching you right now, you're watching a dream often. It's not that often you see yourself walking around in the dreams. You're often saying, well, I was looking at this. It's like I'm looking out different eyes. But I'm looking out, if you think of that as a house, I'm no longer looking out the front door into my neighborhood. I'm looking out the back door into this space. It's like you open up your back door and it's only, outer space. And that's the sense of what I'm looking at, which is the experience people get often. It's like looking at that, because you get there easiest through the dream. The other way is working through prayer and meditation. That's why so often you're told, be still. Stop thinking about the outer world. Stop being influenced by the outer world. Be still and know that I am God. If you are still enough long enough, you will. People don't like being still. Why? Because the first thing they meet is the parts of themselves out here, that shadowy part, they don't like. So you sit there on a silent retreat for about a day and a half. And about, into the second day, you're all of a sudden going, Lord, why are you so agitated? You must rest, don't you? Because there's something right behind the surface. And then you wait long enough, and it's like, I'm having these images and these thoughts, and all of a sudden I've got these things going on, and and it's like, and if somebody's been into, doing stuff like, pornography, all of a sudden after about 2 days, it's like all they can think about is like, can't get back to the website, things of this nature, or you start thinking about things you've been avoiding, which is, I've always wanted to kill that person, and, it's stuff like this, or other things like that you have to face that you usually avoid. Such as, like a real example that is used on describing why some people have agoraphobia. Woman, afraid to go outside. Why am I afraid to go outside? Finally, I don't know. Finally, she goes, well, sat silently enough with it. I'll tell you why I'm afraid to go outside, because, why are you worried about that? Can't you do something, take it to the next level. I think I'm going to like it. Why? I don't like my husband. I'd like to have sex with somebody else. Rather than face that fact, she got agoraphobia. That's what happens when you sit with it long enough in a silence like that. And that's the sense. She met a part of herself that she could not reconcile. Now it's good to meet it, because then you go, now you can say no to it. So now you're going to be in that parking lot, and you're going to see some good-looking guy, and you're going to go, no, I decided it's not worth losing my marriage over. And I think I'll go into marriage counseling. Good. Because it came, but we avoid it. So some people avoid it with what we call is, some sort of illness like that. Most of us just avoid it by being distracted. The world today avoids it with drugs to a great degree. These things. Drugs, alcohol, sex, and rock and roll. That type of idea we always talk about. Great distractions. So then you get silent. And you notice we can't even be silent in church very much. You have more than 30 seconds of silence. You got to fill it with what I call the doodly-doos. I remember telling the pianist once, you can't just have one song go to another one. You got to have doodly-doos. I don't know what they're called, transitions. Okay, thank you. But the doodly-doos, do the doodly-doos. All good Pentecostals have doodly-doos. That's the sense. It's like, why? Because people all of a sudden don't want the silence. There's something wrong. Rather than, what happens if you actually left a minute of total silence? We can't handle a minute, And so just think of a day. And that's when we say, be still. Know that I am God by being silent. And now you'll have to meet first yourself, and then later. St. Teresa of Avila said this in her autobiography, which is that when people found out that she was this great mystic and had visions and all this, they flocked to her convent. And they all wanted to be in spiritual direction with her. And then she'd send them out and say, first thing you're going to do is just pray like this, go to church, these things, and be quiet. No, I'm not. I want visions. I want to be levitating. I want the big stuff. And so, no, you're going to first meet yourself. Something like 90% of the people that never came back. Because they go, that's not what we want. We don't want to meet ourselves. And yet that is, as we keep going to tonight with this thing, the Book of Revelation, that is the first thing you meet. Like when I'm saying the seals start to open, we're going to look at them and say, how are you going to deal with the conqueror within you? much less the conqueror out there that we look at next.
Mm.
How are you going to deal with that greedy person that's within you versus dealing with the greed of the world? Once you know how to deal with it in you, you'll know how to deal with the greeds of the world. Because those are the other horsemen, aren't they? You know, greed and avarice and things. You know, it's called Sonoma and Marin County in Napa, which is, you know, a denarius for the whatever, I forgot the name now,
Right.
of barley.
Right.
But do not touch the
wine.
grapes or the olives.
Mhm.
You know, we need, and now I'd say also your hops now around here too, because you know, don't touch the microbreweries, the wineries, or the olive oil,
Mm.
which only people that have money can afford.
Mm.
Mhm.
But that sense when it says a denarius for a day's wages of barley, it's for one person. That means that person worked to only feed themselves and not their family, which means they're all going to starve. But so you're not going to get the food. We're going to rip out all the apples in Sebastopol, and we're putting hops in and grapes. No longer we're going to grow corn here. We're going to grow olives. And so we've got stuff that we can sell and make money off of, but people are going to starve. Now that's that sense of one of the horsemen. And now we go, where is that greed in me? We love to skip to that next one. That's why I'm holding us our feet to the fire. We love to skip to, look at those greedy people out there. And it's like, no, they're only there because it's in all of us. Well, how am I going to deal with it in me?
Mm.
And then if I can answer that, I'll know how to deal with that other person in the world. And so that's the sense of what we're kind of going at, is we have to face ourselves, which is what the dream does. And so we kind of look tonight at both, look at your dreams, but we're really looking at this as, again, John's dream. Because as John says, you know, on Sunday, I was on Patmos, where I'd been exiled, and I went into the Spirit. Well, we all know what that means. If you're in the Spirit, you're in a visionary state.
Mhm.
And as we already talked about at the beginning, a visionary state is a dream state. So you're going to interpret dreams and visions the same way. And so we go, okay, John, we've got your dream. And your dream is the dream for every human being. Your dream is the dream for the world. So we need to understand it for ourselves personally and for this world around us.
Very good.
Very good. We only got through 4 pages. I told you it was going to take a while. But if you're going to read this book, we're on page 4, and we'll move more into about how to interpret dreams, and then hopefully move in, maybe not next time, but the time after for sure, the letters to the 7 churches. So if you want to do this, we won't get through more than the letters to the 7 churches for sure next